Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we'll have a 8-game college basketball slate for you that starts at 6:30 Eastern. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Also, make sure to check out YouTube memberships. I hope everybody did great yesterday in college basketball. I cashed everywhere. I also had a really good parlay in sportsbook, a 7-game parlay where I got all 7 right, so that was pretty awesome. We've had some good stuff in there. I actually put those picks in Discord, so make sure to check Discord out below too, because I'll be putting picks in there throughout the day as I go through the other teams. With that said, let's get into this slate. So this slate is pretty interesting as we have several blow-up games, and then we have a few games that are relatively tight. It's going to be kind of a rougher slate, though there are some injuries on the later game teams. For the most part, it seems like most all of this is mostly worked out, so I don't think there's too much that we're going to have to worry about later in the slate and all that. But overall, the highest scoring game is going to be the Rice um, game here. Uh, and then in the lowest scoring game is probably either going to be the Ohio State game or the Charlotte game. So overall, we have some interesting games though here. So let's go ahead and get into the slate. Um, I'm just going to go team to team here and kind of give you my breakdown of what I think about that. What about these players and stuff? So let's go ahead and get into the uh, first game here. So we're going to feature um, uh, Seton Hall here as the team that should win this game by around 20 points. At least that's what the metrics look like. And Richmond is going to be the guy on this team that we're going to want to look at and potentially target. He's been very good in his 2 games. He's got similar matchups as the first 2 games, as in Seton Hall should be able to dominate this game. And he's played very well. He also gets some peripheral stats, and he's got a pretty high floor right now. His price is obviously very expensive, but he's definitely in play on the slate. It's kind of hard to like too much of anybody else for Seton Hall there. But if we look at Albany here, then we're going to have some options here. One being Sebastian Thomas. Now he's a pretty even price here. Obviously, this game is at risk of a big blowout, but he's cheap enough that he's worth a consideration. Though he does carry some risk. But if anybody on this team is going to have their good game, it would be him. Then we'll look at Bertam, for who's only $4,000, and he should get 20 to 25, 30 minutes in this one, and he's getting enough scoring and rebounding to have some potential here. Obviously, he does carry risk as well, being a minimum price in a lower quality game. Uh, Also, Amari Marshall has some utility here, though it does feel a little bit risky on this one. Uh, but he's played okay even in the game where they lost to UMass. So he missed the shots, but he still scored fantasy points decently. So that's what I like in the first game there. Then we're going to look at the Ohio State game here. And we got 2 players for Ohio State that we like, one being Thornton. He's played very well in his first 2 games. His price has come up some as a result, but I do like his potential in this one, as this game should be pretty lopsided. They are projected to win the game by a lot, and I look for him to have a pretty good game. Now, this is a low scoring game, so that is a concern here, but he's definitely in play. Looking at Gale for Ohio State, he's also really good right now. He's actually got really good opportunity to have a huge game here at his price point, especially with the blow up potential here. He's played over 30 minutes in both the first 2 games, and so I hope that he can play that kind of minutes and have that upside on this particular slate. As for Merrimack, we're going to look at Clark there, who has played very well in his 3 games. Even in a tougher matchup here, he's going to have some potential. They had a pretty tough game in their first game, and he still managed to score 26 fantasy points. I think he's a pretty safe spot on the slate, and so he's definitely somebody I like. Then we're going to look at the next game here for Richmond and Boston College, and we actually have several different options from this game. Now, this is going to be one of the tighter games on the slate, and it does have a pretty decent scoring. This is actually the closest game at just a 3.5 point spread in Boston College's favor. As for that, I really only like one guy on Boston College, and he is coming off the bench for them, and that's Donald Hand. He's played very well in his 2 games, and I think he'll probably get some more minutes than this one since it's going to be a closer game, and he has a good scoring potential, and he's getting rebounding the ball well. So he's definitely somebody to consider here. Looking at Richmond, though, we have a lot of guys that I like quite a bit. First being King at $6,100. He's just been pretty solid in his first two games, even in not quite as many minutes. He's got some nice upside here. I think over minutes will probably actually be more since this game is going to be tighter. And I think that they have a capability of actually sticking with it here. So we'll look at Delaney Hunt as well for Richmond. He's played very well, scoring and getting assists, and I think he'll be able to continue that and have a really good day here. He's priced really fairly. Then we have a guy coming off the bench for them in Bailey. Now, he's only played 18 minutes a game so far, but he's doing a lot in those minutes. And even though the first two games were kind of blow up games, he's going to have some potential in this one, though he does carry a risk coming off the bench. And then we'll look at Quinn for the Spiders here as well, as he's had two really solid games to start the season, and I expect him to try to continue to have that, though his minutes may be a little bit in flux, but he's definitely capable of a good game here. Then we're going to look at the Charlotte game, and this is going to be an interesting one, as we really only have one player from Charlotte that I like, and that is going to be Graves for them. He's played pretty well. He's also dirt cheap, and he's actually scored the most points of any player on their team, and he's playing a pretty good amount of minutes. And even though both games have been a little bit lopsided, both one in favor of Charlotte and one against, he's played well in both, and so I do think he's going to have some potential here. I'm really surprised his price is this point. Now, this is one of the slowest scoring games on the slate, so keep that in mind. But it's only a 5 point spread, and Charlotte is favored to win. And there's two players over here on Utah Valley that I think is interesting. One being Doherty for $4,000. Now, he does carry a risk because this is a slow down game, but he's managed to score some points, and he's getting some peripheral stats which are helping him score fantasy points, and he's just dirt cheap. And then also McLaughlin, or McClanahan, excuse me, for them. He's actually scored really good fantasy points his first two games, both in pretty tight games. So I expect him to have some potential in this one to continue that. And he's going to get a ton of minutes, and he's starting, so that gives him a lot of upside here. I'm a little surprised that two of the best players, the two of one of the higher scoring players on each team, is pretty minimum priced on this particular slate. So that's definitely interesting here. As for the Nebraska game here, this game does jump into the where we start having some uh, blow up type games, and three of the next four, there's more than a 10 point spread on each. But this particular game, we do have one injury concern in Gary, as he is questionable. Now, he hasn't played yet this season, but he's definitely possible that he could come back today. But I really don't like much from this game because everybody feels a little bit pricey, and I couldn't really find anybody that really felt pretty safe. You could look at Wilcher for Nebraska a little bit, but and maybe even Clark for where is he? For Stoney. Sorry, he's going to have some potential here, but they all carry some risks. So I think that these two teams are mostly avoidable on the slate. Then we're going to look at uh, George Georgetown and Rutgers here. And this game is actually about a 9 point spread. And the only team players I do like from this game are on Georgetown, who are the underdog here, but they do have some potential. And one of them being Rowan here. He's scored pretty good fantasy points so far. He's a little bit pricey, but he does get a lot of peripheral stats, and that's going to give him some upside. And then we're going to look at Epps here as well, as he's pretty good price for the amount of minutes he's playing and the fantasy point upside. He had 11 assists in his first game, but he only had 5 points, and then he kind of switched that. Didn't really get the assists, but he did get the points. So I think he's got some capability of having a really solid game here, and I do like both these guys from these two teams. Looking at the Rice Texas Texas game, excuse me. Both these teams, both these last two games are very big spreads at over 20 points, and it look like Texas is going to win this game pretty easily. And I've got two players from them to consider. One being Mitchell. He's priced pretty fairly here. He's had two really solid games, and he should play around 30 minutes. Even if the game gets out of hand, he should be a guy that gets a decent chunk of minutes here as price point. And then Horton is actually leading the team in points. He should. He hasn't got quite as many minutes, but both their first two games have been blowouts, and this one's going to be one as well. And both those two guys have a lot of potential in this one. Then we're going to look at the final game of UCLA and LIU. Now, I felt like UCLA is a little bit overpriced today, and so they're pretty avoidable. But LIU actually does have a player that has some potential, and this is a high risk strategy here, but it is Strickland. Now, this is Ter Strickland, not TIA Strickland. Sorry if I'm butchering your names, but I just wanted to make sure to be clear. This is number 11 on the team, and he has some potential at this minimum price. So, with that said, guys, this is obviously an interesting slate, but it's probably going to be a harder slate to really get really good because the value, while it is there, they all seem to be in high risk situations, and we got a couple games, quite a few games are blowouts. So, overall, though, it should be an interesting slate. Let me know in the comments below who you like. Excuse me, and have a nice day, guys.